Oh, that's hot. That's hot.
The premiere of the Overwatch League began in early January 2018, featuring just only 12 out of the 20 teams we know in the Overwatch League. This was quite a delayed launch considering that way back in BlizzCon 2016, the Overwatch League was announced and set to be released in 2017, claiming, idolizing and glorifying the path to pro, which, if you ask anyone who's been involved in the semi-pro scene, is sugarcoating things to say the least. Players were also promised big monthly checks, which haven't aged quite well.
Signed it on a contract.
But we'll get onto that later. For now, the days of Overwatch between 2016 and the build-up of the Overwatch League in the early 2018 are commonly seen as the glory days of Overwatch, with the numbers clearly reflecting that, as just in the opening week of the Overwatch League did it pull 10 million viewers, which obviously pales in comparison to the 5 digits the league pulls now. The first few months of the league were decently successful, I'd say. Dive was predominantly meta at time, featuring Zen, Mercy, Winston and D.Va as mainstays, but with the DPS slots left open and flexible depending on the team. Most teams had run some variety of Tracer, Genji, Soldier, Cassidy and Doomfist, unless you're the Houston Outlaws of course, with the infamous J-Lock rat. Keep in mind that a few months prior, Mercy had been buffed out the wazoo, causing the Moth meta where at its peak, Mercy could res up to 4 times under 25 seconds, though I don't believe this era of Mercy had bled into Owl. Excusing that balancing hiccup from Blizzard, the league seemed to run as intended, with some teams having its fair share of problems. The Dallas Fuel, for example, performed significantly worse than expected, considering their roster was predominantly Team Envy, the academy team for the Fuel, who are renowned for their incredible win streak in major and minor contenders tournaments. Of course, you can't mention 2018 Dallas Fuel without XQC, who had his fair share of controversies with the homophobic remark to Muma alongside the Triad 7 situation.
On March 9th, 2018, XQC was suspended by Blizzard for the second time in as many stages. This time for using the tryhard emote in a racially disparaging way towards one of the Overwatch League's casters. The Dallas Fuel took action. And this time, there was no shot at redemption.
Speaking of infamy, there's the Boston Uprising, who signed now caster Avast onto the team, but had no play whatsoever and became a bit of a meme due to the goofy league photo. There was also the LA Valiant, with Noah Winston's serious talk with Agilities about his future on the roster outside of an in-and-out car park.
So you understand that you're going to have a shot at the main roster again.
Yeah.
But to be transparent with you, like, this is the shot. If this doesn't work, it's going to be really hard to kind of build that bond up again.
The in-and-out moment became a meme referenced both in and out of the Overwatch community.
More broadly though, not only was the Overwatch League doing well, but the community that surrounded it, including its content creators, were also popping off and arguably at their peak. For instance, Bad Pachamari's marketable series garnered hundreds of thousands of views apiece, Action Esports covering Pine's unforgettable hero play on Junkertown gained over 1 million views.
Widowmakers would go for this play.
Yeah, but Pinewood,
And he just absolutely nails it here. Even the machine gun, what a flick!
are you serious?
Alongside Andrew JRT's Overwatch League on Drugs video, pulling quintuple the view count, and it's not hard to see why. Not to mention, the fact that games were live in person instead of being played online also helped not only the viewership, but the connection people feel when seeing their favourite player or team perform live. To explain it a bit more, here's Nathan Zed using the example of live performance music.
What happens when the artists and the listeners come together under the same roof? The energy can make the music sound even better. It can make you realize, oh, this is the situation this was built for.
Speaking of live performance music, we can't forget DJ Khaled's legendary performance in July 2018 on the Overwatch League stage in the Grand Finals.
This DJ Khaled album, it's not good.
Ignoring that awkward performance to say the least, the London Spitfire managed to top the Philadelphia Fusion in a pretty convincing manner, winning the grand prize of $1 million. On the flip side, Shanghai Dragons has set an all-time record, not just for Overwatch, but for any sport in general, for being the first team to set a loss streak record of 0 games won and 40 games lost. However, before moving on to 2019, we also can't forget the introduction of Brigitte in March 2018, a character considered to be a necessary evil designed to counter the persistent dive meta at the time, but ended up causing an over year-long brawl meta which we now come to know as GOATs. Luckily for the Overwatch League, GOATs didn't really make an introduction in the Overwatch League in 2018. In fact, GOATS was derived by a semi-professional team called GOATS, who featured Gator, who's now a tank player for the Atlanta Reign, Kaluge, the recent tank player to replace Super for the San Francisco Shock, and Reiner, who was known as Sit at the time, who unsurprisingly also plays tank for the LA Gladiators. XQC also trialled for this team publicly way back in early June of 2018.
No! It's good! Give one up top left.
Nice. Targets.
Big!
Stay hurt. Who had?
Yes!
It wouldn't be a few months later, after the first season of the Overwatch League had ended, that people would begin to realise how broken of a hero Brigitte was. You're Not Justin, a former Overwatch YouTuber gone Valorant, showed how you could go from gold to masters in a single week just by playing the hero, and it's no surprise that as we enter the second season of the Overwatch League, GOATS became the established meta.
Oh shit, here we go again.
Now with the added 8 teams of the Vancouver Titans, Toronto Defiant, Chengdu Hunters, Paris Eternal, Guangzhou Charge, Hangzhou Spark, and the Atlanta Reign, alongside the increased prize pool from $1.8 million in total in 2018 to $5 million in total in 2019, the league was looking to expand beyond the initial scope of the inaugural season, and it surprisingly worked. The total reach of the Overwatch League in its opening week in 2019 was 13 million instead of 10, leading to a 30% increase, and the AMA, or the average minute audience, increased by 14% compared to last year. Looking back on it retrospectively, it's surprising to see these kinds of numbers for how one-dimensional the meta was at the time, but considering it was the first week where the player base would see GOATS alongside the addition of new teams, perhaps it was refreshing rather than boring. But that wasn't really the point. Whatever was meta at the time didn't really matter. The history these teams had already built, such as Shanghai finally overcoming their 0-42 loss streak,
The primal rage, but it does not matter! Ladies and gentlemen, history has been made!
or the epic rivalries built up between teams, most notably the Shock and the Titans, with former Titans main tank player Bumper polarizing analysts.
You clearly don't know who you're talking to, so let me clue you in. I am not in danger, Skylar. I am the danger.
Not to mention, the meta was arguably diverse to some extent, with some teams, most notably Chengdu, running multi-DPS compositions. All of this led to 2019 being a top year of Overwatch League, not just analytically speaking, but on a personal level with the fans as well. With this being said though, there was some annoyance at the meta being GOATs all the time, such as the moment when Houston Outlaws got booed at for swapping off their poke dive composition onto GOATs.
Some of the things that Outlaws fans have been waiting for is a good tracer player on Houston. It's Jake on the far. This combo's worked well for them before, but as soon as they see the defensive setup, they will just simply swap it away. Crucial time lost here for the Outlaws.
However, this didn't really matter for the higher echelon of games, as by the end of Stage 2, where the Shock finally got revenge against the Titans,
And the Shock have done it! They are your Stage 2 champions!
a new viewership record was set with an AMA of over 500,000. Keep in mind, this isn't peak viewership, this is the average number of people watching the game at any minute of the show. Educational Overwatch content also reached new heights, with Action Esports reaching higher levels than before with their videos on GOATs. Jane, who had just entered the Fuel as assistant coach at the time, entered 2019 with some steam as well, and on a smaller, more detailed level, even professional coaches who did lengthy VODs, such as Mineral, current assistant general manager for the Uprising, made some great, groundbreaking GOATs content. Sadly, for some, GOATs would eventually see its end with the introduction of Role Queue in Stage 4 of the Overwatch League. Most competitive players loved it at the time, but most casual players tended to dislike Role Queue, evident in Video Game Donkey's most recent video reviewing the Overwatch 2 PvP beta. Many theorized that Role Queue was introduced to bring the end to GOATs, and whilst that did happen, there were also a ton of competitive benefits to Role Queue, such as finally not getting 5 DPS per game. For the Overwatch League, Role Queue sparked some life back into pro players, particularly DPS players, who had spent the better part of a year learning a role they didn't want to play but needed to in order to keep their careers afloat. However, for some, it was sadly too late. A side to the Overwatch League which we don't really get to see are the mental side effects of being in the public spotlight for so long, with players like Pine retiring for a short period of time due to the pressure of having to perform on a role that wasn't meta for over a year, alongside Jane posting an emotionally raw twitlonger which is now deleted, going over the backlash he and other players from the Dallas Fuel, such as Zachary, had received because of their lackluster performance. More information on Jane's story will be linked in the top right. Anyways, throughout Stage 4, Sigma was released, creating the dreaded double shield meta that we have all come to know and love. Sigma at this point apparently had a 95% pick rate from release, which honestly shouldn't really be surprising. He had a 1500 HP shield, could perform a one-shot combo with his accretion and hyperspheres, and was therefore one of the best duelists in the game. Because of how much shielding there was at the time, teams started to play heroes such as Reaper, Doomfist and Moira, who could bypass the shielding with their mobility or piercing abilities respectively, leading to the Lucio-Moira double shield brawl composition seen in the grand finals between the Shock and the Titans. Because of the Shock's greater flexibility in the meta, alongside Bumper being benched due to his polarizing playstyle on Reinhardt, which, due to 2-2-2 Warlock, he could no longer pull off, the Shock won the grand finals in a convincing 4-0 fashion. The success of the grand finals, though one-sided, reached pretty far as eventually, just a month later, Super and Sinatra would appear on the Jimmy Fallon show, and it would seem that not just Overwatch, but esports as a whole was taking a turn into the mainstream. However, of course, it wouldn't be that simple.
And so, tonight, I want to update you on the latest steps we're taking to fight the disease and what you can do to help.
With the Overwatch League entering a new decade for its third season, with a pretty successful second season, it would be pretty hard for someone to predict the league to take a sharp nosedive, until of course, the news of "Thou Shall Not Be Named" hits. I actually made a very low budget video on this way back in March 2020, which I strongly recommend you do not watch, and essentially, Overwatch League games had been postponed, every team hosting homestand weekends couldn't happen, meaning that games would have to be played online, forcing a division of the league into Western and Eastern teams to minimize ping and latency issues. On paper, because of the pandemic, numbers should have actually increased, considering that this was the year that esports were the only sports available to watch, alongside more people staying at home during lockdown, spending more time online. However, this certainly wasn't the case, evident in the over 60% drop in viewership when comparing the 2019 and 2020 grand finals according to esports charts. Korean viewers also made up a large portion of the Overwatch viewership, meaning that they were less interested in the Western Pacific region. The same would be true of Western viewers not tuning into the Eastern games, overall decreasing numbers by splitting up the regions. Obviously, the pandemic wasn't the only reason, if any at all, to why the viewership dropped so much. If you compare the Call of Duty League to Overwatch, Call of Duty had roughly the same, if not slightly higher numbers on average, even after the change from offline to online games. So, what else is there to the story? Well, the most obvious one is the move from Twitch to YouTube in a $160 million deal. For reference, the deal between the league and Twitch for the first 2 years was only $90 million. As a result, the accumulated audience on Twitch in the past 2 years had been practically nullified, and YouTube just doesn't offer the same streaming experience that Twitch does, whether that be the lack of emotes or the token system, which rewarded people with Overwatch League tokens to buy skins according to how much you watched the league. The lack of discoverability on YouTube also put a dent in the viewership, but the move from Twitch to YouTube is only half the story. As eSport Charts describes, players had moved to other disciplines, namely Valorant, which was a fresh, free-to-play, first-person shooter released on June the 2nd, made to primarily compete with CSGO. As a result, it's no surprise that pro players such as Corey, and more prominently, the league's MVP at the time, Sinatra, leave the league to pursue Valorant, or casters such as Doa, Monte Cristo, or Chris Pocket leaving the league to pursue broader esport ventures. And then, there's of course the decrease in popularity of Overwatch as a whole. In March 2020, Echo would be released, and little did the community know, would be the last new hero to be introduced into Overwatch 1, as just a few months prior in November 2019, Overwatch 2 was announced at BlizzCon, detracting resources away from the main game.
Did you like it? Did you enjoy? Awesome.
Couple this with the Resident Sleeper double shield meta, and the absurd amount of AoE healing heroes like Brigitte and Baptiste could do combined, and it's easy to see why viewership for the league tanked if nobody wanted to play or even watch the game. In order to combat this, hero pools were introduced, but as ATP Overwatch explains here, hero pools were anything but a welcome addition in 2020.
We have to bring up the whole hero pool thing, because that system they had in the first year was not very good. The meta was just changing way too often, and it led to a lot of extra stress and confusion for just about everybody in the team environment. I definitely do appreciate the idea of keeping what's being played fresh. Don't get me wrong, some of those weeks were very exciting. That first week where Soldier got some love was awesome, but usually these hero pools didn't do much of anything. The randomness led to the same characters just getting banned over and over again, and after a while, Double Shield kind of just became the norm.
So in total, the quick rescheduling from the pandemic, the change from Twitch to YouTube, the rise of esports competitors such as Valorant, and the overall decline in interest for Overwatch as a whole all led to the third season of the Overwatch League falling short of what it was truly capable of. Unfortunately, I have no meme to start off the 2021 section, so yeah, you get this awkward transition. The 2021 Overwatch League season was an overall improvement on the scuffed organisation of the prior year. Hero pools had only been in play for 2 out of the 4 stages and had been implemented in a significantly better manner by being on a monthly basis, allowing teams to actually organise themselves instead of playing mystery heroes every week. The token system had also been embedded in a more consistent manner, with viewers now able to clip plays similar to how you would on a Twitch stream. It's pretty clear that the league wanted to play the cards they were dealt, and to be fair to them, they did do a pretty decent job at doing so. Not to mention, the storylines and story arcs of some teams this season were pretty much at their peak. The Dallas Fuel had actually looked like a competent team for once and lived up to expectations, as well as the Shanghai Dragons doing a complete 180 from the 0-42 loss streak in 2018 to winning the league in 2021.
The Dragons teach us that if we want to climb high, we must do it against the wind. The Shanghai Dragons are your 2021 Overwatch League champions!
A truly poetic story, so much so that I dedicated an entire video to it. However, unfortunately, despite the league actually being a decent improvement over the last year, external factors would lead to the demise throughout 2021. The most obvious one is the Blizzard lawsuit scandal that occurred around about July of 2021, tanking the league's sponsors, encouraging people to either stop supporting Blizzard titles entirely, or making people worry and become uncertain about the future of Overwatch. Speaking about uncertainty, the careers of pro players, especially tank players, were at stake when Overwatch was announced to go 5v5 way back in February of 2021, causing community outcry, as esports talk details here.
We see Gator saying, imagine spending 5 years to perfect your role, just for it to be deleted while knowing your role does not translate to another. You expected to give all you got till the end of the season. It's easy to talk about future greatness when you're not the one potentially losing not only your job, but your entire life's work for some. Blizzard just cut more players mid-season than LA Valiant. Everyone was angry about this for the most part, especially at first. Some folks are taking the aggressive route and saying that the change just has to do with saving the Overwatch League some money, while others are just kind of sad that they're losing a tank because they feel like synergizing with tanks is the most fun part of the game.
Whilst we now know that most tank players were able to adapt skill sets and teams having at least 2 tank players available to cover all the possible tank roles, the change to 5v5 would only be the least of concerns when moving into 2022. So, as we enter into 2022, there's actually quite a decent amount of promise for the league. First off, the Overwatch League was announced by John Spector to be played on an early build of Overwatch 2 in the coming year. Secondly, there was the whole secret content creator NDA meeting that happened around December time, which built up a lot of hype. And thirdly, at the beginning of 2022, Microsoft, in a $70 billion deal, announces to buy Activision Blizzard. So far, everything seemed on the uprise, especially considering the content drought for the past 2 years that had sucked the life out of both aspiring and established pro players, as well as the general player base, was going to end. However, everything goes downhill from here. Because of the lawsuit that was brought to public attention in 2021, the Overwatch League lost all of its sponsors, and these were some pretty big names, whether it be Coca-Cola, T-Mobile, IBM, State Farm, Pringles, or Cheez-It Grooves. This meant that the funding and longevity of the league would certainly be limited, whether that be forming prize pools or paying any Overwatch League staff. The prize pool for Overwatch tournaments as a whole had also been on the decline since 2019, being practically halved going into 2021, so without sponsors, I would not be surprised if the tournament prize pool for Overwatch dipped into the 3 million zone in 2022. To go even further, casters and players were unfortunately dropping like flies. Most notably, casters Sideshow and Bren did not sign onto contracts for this season of the Overwatch League, likely due to lackluster payments, and Sideshow broadly describes esport casters as being underpaid compared to their more traditional counterparts.
Well, let's start here. Broadcast talent in esports is massively underpaid compared to broadcast talent in television or equivalent stuff like that.
Alarm had also sadly passed away late 2021 in November, who was widely considered to be one of, if not the best flex support of all time in the Overwatch League.
Alarm is the best all-round flex support ever. He had no holes in his game and could carry from any hero, a true legend, and that is Sideshow's quote.
Fortunately, Alarm's legacy would be embedded into the Overwatch League, with the Rookie of the Year award being named after him, as he had received the award in 2020. Super the former main tank for the San Francisco Shock and one of the most recognizable faces in the league, had also retired in March to further his career in streaming and content creation with resounding support from the Overwatch community. Fast forward to April, and Provide, flex support for the London Spitfire, had gone into hot water after old DMs came forward about Provide, aged 20 at the time, flirted with a 16-year-old in a special needs school. As a result, the Spitfire dropped Provide. I also made this banger Twitter meme which got over 1,000 likes on Provide, so I'll show it here.
They got your ass on camera. This is the clearest video I've ever seen. This is the most HD shit ever. This is 4K. How did they get you in 4K?
That ain't me.
Swiftly moving on from drama, another key change was the contracts. Teams could now sign players on 30-day contracts, meaning teams didn't have to invest into their players, especially if they weren't playing well. Many players such as Naga and Glister, who are considered to be the best players in the Palace Eternal, were dropped early into this season, and another victim of this was Adam, who was dropped by the Florida Mayhem, though this was somewhat worse, considering Adam stated that the staff didn't even have the respect to drop him in person, and that they hid his departure underneath the signing of flex support player Rupal. Here's Costa from Platchat speaking about the issues with a 30-day player contract and how a middle ground needs to be found in terms of contract length.
I played during the era of like when you signed a contract, you're fucking dandy, like you're chilling throughout the rest of the season, and there are historical teams and players who have abused that fact. I understand this is to protect the organization, but maybe the organizations should do a better job of building rosters. The Florida Mayhem are a team that I think is the worst for this right now. They signed Mira and then just dropped him before the season even began. They did the same thing with Kriv, who is now just moved to a coach. They then did it with Adam again. They're signing lots of players without any expectation to commit to them. That is not fair to the players who, you know, someone like Adam, I've literally done this trek, I've lived in this. You fly over to the US on a visa, you think you've finally gotten your opportunity to play, and then you never get an opportunity to play, and then they just drop you and you have to go back to Australia. Is anyone going to want to sign Adam again? He signed to the Florida Mayhem, didn't get to play, didn't do anything. His career could have gone down the drain, and I think it's very unfair, these people signing, especially international players, and then just dropping them willy-nilly. There needs to be a middle ground between this, always getting stuck with multi-year contracts and only 30-day contract as of us. Yeah.
Yet another instance of a player being dropped due to the 30-day contract change was Eileen on the Guangzhou Charge, who stated that his contract was terminated due to his high salary. The Charge responded by stating that they
reserve the right to pursue legal responsibility for those involved. So, listen, no matter how you Google Translate that, it seems to imply some level of threats of litigation towards people spreading what they're alleging are false accusations.
To add on top of this even further, players such as Marvel on the LA Valiant are being signed onto contracts which are being paid by the players and not by the organization, which therefore sets a bad precedent for the league if players are willing to reduce their contracts and even go below the minimum league payout of 50 grand, as they no longer need to have contracts set in stone. Here's Avaz describing the issues in more detail.
Everyone should be talking about this forever, because it essentially tells you that contracts don't matter. You can just be like, actually, we're all going to fund this new player from your contracts because we don't have the budget. And that means you're getting paid less than your agreed upon money. And two, there was like 10 select Valiant fans on Twitter that got really, really mad at me for daring to suggest this was an issue. And we're like, no, you don't get it, you stupid idiot. You're so condescending. Easy Han and Haker just don't get paid. And that's why it's on issue. And I'm like...
And they're happy with it. It's like, what?
And I was like, so you're telling me that 2 of their 5 DPS players just don't get paid at all? And you're saying that makes this situation better? And they're like, no, it's because Easy Han's so rich. And it's like, they actually housing all of them in Korea. And like, I don't give a fuck if this guy was Bill Gates' son. You should be legally required to get paid if you're performing work. If they're just not paying players and they have 5 DPS players, then No Hill's essentially he's just amassing a bunch of indentured servants on the Valiant roster. That is like there's no player contracts, no stipulations.
Moving away from contracts and onto the game itself, of course there was the Overwatch 2 beta on April 26th, of which you are guaranteed access if you watch the list of streamers for 4 hours, but the beta kinda died out very quickly. With no competitive mode, or at least partial competitive mode at the time, streamers felt bored queuing into quick play lobbies all the time, and it showed with the sharp viewership drop of 1.5 million to around about a few thousands. Not to mention, the first Overwatch 2 beta ended May 17th, meaning casual players, alongside viewers of the Overwatch League, felt disconnected from the pros as they were playing on a completely different game at the time. Speaking of disconnects, There's also the disconnect between the dev team and the Overwatch League team. The most obvious example of this was with Florida Mayhem's quote-unquote illegal move on Circuit Royale, where they utilised the May wall to get a cheeky TP over a rooftop, which was disallowed. There's also the disconnect that nobody is talking about, and that's with these new set of balance patch notes that the Overwatch League are playing on, with Sojourn's new buff, Mercy's new super jump change, and Bap's new instant heal buff. According to the dev team, these changes were mainly just thrown in at the last second for the sake of it, but according to the Overwatch League team, they were serious competitive changes. It's Paul discussing it further.
So we have the devs who are like, hey, let's just throw stuff at the wall and be a little experimental. And then we have the Overwatch League team, and they're clearly not talking to each other, who are saying, yes, this is great. This is our competitive patch to play on. Like, isn't this the point of owning the IP? And that's, you know, why we never should have had any issue with the illegal move thing. Like, this is the point of owning the IP and the league, guys, and you're totally missing it. Do better. Please!
And now, current day, whilst this video is being scripted, the second beta for Overwatch 2 has just been released on June the 28th and will last until July the 18th. Overwatch 2 PvP has also been announced to be released on October 4th with a new support hero, alongside a content roadmap with a new hero every 18 weeks, and most importantly, Overwatch has gone free to play. There was some controversy about people having to pay $15 to select streamers to get a Brigitte skin during the beta's uptime, with some arguing as to why there were select streamers from people who don't even play the game, compared to people who weren't included, yet they've been grinding their ass off waiting for Overwatch 2.
We feel like they got left off.
Is in the league.
Yeah, Asmongold's on it. Mr. Rex is fucking on it. Mr. Rex does a bi-yearly stream every now and then.
When was the last time we showed 2 years?
Andy Belford, community lead for Overwatch, stated that this run was more limited and wanted to expand further, but some would use the argument of, why not make everyone who streams in the Overwatch 2 category viable for the $15 skin promotion. Regardless, Overwatch 2 did bring a nice change of pace for the majority of viewers and for the pros, especially those who were skeptical about the switch to 5v5. However, because the first beta ended on May 17th, viewers weren't as interested, and the numbers in the kickoff clash do reflect that.
55k peak, which is way down at like a 69k peak last year for the May Melee. That's a really big drop, actually. The viewership has been increasing year on year, apart from when we fell into a pit in 2020, when everyone just forgot the league was happening. But apart from that, last year's viewership was really good, but this tournament, people didn't watch it.
Because people can't play the game. People don't want to watch a game that they can't play.
Cus says it right. Like, there's not even replay viewers. No one can even look at the point of views. There's just nothing available for people to like further connect and create anything or engage with what's going on.
So, all in all, if you had to ask me whether I thought the Overwatch League could make a comeback, my response would be something along the lines of what Gregor says here.
I'm going to use a word that a lot of men have a hard time using.
Right now, bandit.
Sorry, this is a tough one for me. Hold on. I don't know. That was difficult.
The entire Overwatch player base, whether it be casual or competitive fans, or pro players, are worried about the future of the game and the league that comes with it. Whilst there is some hopium coming soon with the content roadmap and whatnot, we can't ignore that the league is struggling financially, especially with no sponsors, due to something that the Overwatch team likely had no participation in whatsoever. We also can't ignore the sharpest nosedive in all of mankind, with that Twitch viewership dropping from over 1.5 million to struggling in the 5 digits. I simply don't know what the future of this game or of the Overwatch League really stands. So I'll leave it on that note. Let me know your thoughts down below, and I'll be responding to comments as always. And of course, if you enjoyed, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. If this video helped to raise your IQ, be sure to share it with your friends to also raise theirs. Until next time.